Paul Schrader's First Reforms, filmed in 2018, is a film that challenges the conventions of mainstream cinema. Drawing from Schrader's extensive knowledge of transcendental cinema, this film delves into themes of existential and spiritual crisis. Set against the backdrop of the deteriorating world, the film tells the story of Reverend Ernst Toller, a pastor grappling with environmental despair and personal guilt. Schrader uses a slow, meditative style that's not just innovative, but also experimental, asking viewers to reflect on as much on the form as the content. While First Reformed is innovative in how it deals with common themes of faith and redemption, its experimental nature comes from its use of formal techniques that disrupt standard cinematic norms. Schrader employs long, static shots and avoids traditional camera movements. This formal restraint and minimalism push the boundaries of narrative filmmaking, making the audience focus on the weight of each moment. Rather than simply innovating on past techniques, Schrader experiments with how far the film form can be stripped back. The experimental aspect of First Reform isn't just a matter of filmmaking technique, it's part of the film's entire worldview. By this, I mean that Schrader uses the film to question the limits of human faith in a world on the brink of ecological disaster. The film's slow pace and sparse dialogue reflect Reverend Toller's internal and external disintegration. The formal experimentation mirrors the thematic depth, with Schrader suggesting that mainstream approaches to life and cinema are inadequate for expressing the existential crisis. So, although First Reform follows a mostly linear narrative, time is treated differently rather than in conventional films. Schrader employs an elliptical structure at key moments, particularly in scenes where Reverend Toller's inner turmoil spills over into surreal imagery. One prime example of this is the magical mystery flight scene, where Toller and Mary imagine flying off over desolate landscapes, which disrupts the otherwise realistic flow of the rest of the film. That suggests that time for Schrader is less about continuity and more about reflecting inner psychological and spiritual states. And here's a clip. Unlike traditional Hollywood continuity editing, Schrader uses a more disruptive style in First Reformed. This is evident in the film's pacing, which deliberately withholds dramatic action to let the audience dwell in moments of quiet contemplation. The abrupt cut to black at the film's climax is a clear example of how Schrader abandons continuity storytelling in favor of an unresolved and ambiguous ending. This choice forces the viewers to engage with the film on a deeper, more introspective level, rather than providing clear narrative closure. The editing in First Reform complements the film's transcendental style. Schrader frequently uses long takes, which allow the scenes to unfold slowly and organically. The minimalist editing focuses on creating a durational experience, where the weight of the narrative is felt not through quick cuts or action, but through deliberate passage of time. The editing approach serves the film's overall sense of meditation on faith, guilt, and despair, encouraging the audience to contemplate each moment more deeply. One of the most striking aspects of First Reformed is its use of sound, or the lack thereof. By this I mean the sound design is minimalist, with non-diegetic music instead. Schrader uses silence and ambient sounds to heighten the sense of isolation that Reverend Toller experiences throughout the film. Ethan Hawke's performance mirrors that minimalist approach. His restrained acting style, devoid of emotional outbursts, adds to the meditative quality of the film. His character's internal struggle is portrayed through the subtle gestures and quiet moments of reflection rather than dramatic dialogue. Rituals play a central role in First Reforms, particularly through Reverend Toller's daily routines. His religious rituals, such as leading prayer, journaling, serve as ways to maintain order amidst his growing inner chaos. Toller's journaling becomes almost ritualistic, as he confesses his darkest thoughts in his notebook. However, by the film's climax, these rituals begin to take on darker forms. In the barbed wire scene, where Toller prepares for martyrdom, he engages in an act that mimics religious ritual but is deeply perverse, a sign of spiritual unraveling. And this is from the barbed wire scene. As Toller's spiritual crisis deepens, his behavior deviates further from the expectations of his role as a pastor. Early in the film, we see him trying to uphold his religious duties, counseling his parishioners, preaching sermons, but as his eco-anxiety grows, so too does his radicalism. He grows obsessed with environmental destruction, leading him to contemplate acts of violence, culminating in his preparation for a suicide bombing, which is a sharp deviation from his pastoral duties and traditional religious behaviors. Although First Reformed is grounded in realism, it frequently departs from this mode through surreal or symbolic imagery. For example, the film presents a striking vision of environmentally ravaged Earth, which blurs the lines between reality and hallucination. These surreal elements reflect Reverend Teller's deteriorating mental and spiritual state, creating a tension between the real world and the world as perceived by Toller. Schrader's use of this heightened reality serves to externalize the character's internal collapse. The film's ambiguous final scene, where Teller prepares to commit suicide, but is interrupted by Mary, raises questions about what is real and what is imagined. Is Mary's embrace real, or is it a figment of Toller's imagination as he approaches death? The cut to black leaves the question unanswered, forcing the audience to grapple with ambiguity. This deliberate lack of resolution reflects Schrader's transcendental style, where moments of spiritual transcendence are often marked by silence and stillness. To conclude, First Reform stands out as both an experimental and innovative film. Through his transcendental style, Paul Schrader pushes the boundaries of traditional narrative filmmaking, using form to explore deeper philosophical questions about faith, guilt, and environmental destruction. The film's unique approach to time, narrative, and realism makes it a powerful example of how cinema can experiment with both structure and theme to engage the audience on multiple levels.